First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone, wherever you are. This is a pleasure for me to host this first webinar on what we have called Osmosis for the new Advancing the Literature that is produced by one effort that we did before to have a literature review, systematic literature review on how osmosis has progressed in the past 10 years. And now for me, it's a pleasure to have Thomas Heggarty in this first webinar. Just to start, let me introduce our presenter today. Thomas Heggarty has been working as a researcher for RTE, the French electricity transmission system operator, since 2017. He obtained a master in engineering in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Strathclyde and a PhD from Mainz Paris, PSL, focusing on the optimal mix of power system flexibility. His research interests include long-term energy system planning and market design for well-coordinated sector coupling, and he is active in reinforcing the link between academia and industry, and probably this is why he kindly is kindly supporting this initiative from our side. So for today, we have one presentation on one of these first osmosis papers that we were able to find in the systematic literature review. The name of the presentation and also the same name of the paper is Assessing the Relative Impacts of Maximum Investment Rate and Temporal Detail and Capacity Expansion Models Applied to Power Systems. And I think I have said everything about what is important. I think there is no someone more capable to explain what is this paper about than Thomas. So Thomas, thank you so much once again for joining us today, and the audience is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you also for the opportunity to present this paper. As I'm not entirely sure of what each participant's background is, feel completely free to interrupt me during the presentation to ask any question whatsoever. I'm not sure I'll be able to follow the questions in the chat, so maybe the chat might be more suited for different questions you might want to ask at the end. I think Fernando's mentioned all the appropriate introduction elements, so I'm going to go straight into it now, if that's okay with you. First of all, an outline of the presentation, which mostly follows the outline of the paper, if ever you've had the opportunity to read it already, or if you wish to do so later on. I'll start by mentioning the motivation behind this work, follow up on the methodology. I won't go into much detail about the framework because I'm assuming everybody here is familiar with osmosis, at least to some degree. But I will mention a few points on the case study and then describe the sensitivity analysis protocol that I've applied in this paper. In the results section, I'll show the relative impacts of the two key parameters of interest for this particular study, the level of temporal detail and maximum investment rates. And I'll show how these two parameters have a significant impact on total system costs, on installed capacity, and on the generation mix. And then I'll wrap up with a few key messages for you to take away, mention a few limitations to our work, and also ongoing work that we have going on at RT on the use of osmosis. Now, mention a few things about that. First of all, the motivation. Basically, the general ideas we had before setting up this work. Basically, there's a lack of temporal detail in energy system models generally, particularly those that focus on capacity expansion planning, and this can lead to inaccurate results. This is a well-known problem that has been investigated for quite a while and has motivated much research work and ongoing work. most of it has tried to find, as you would expect, new ways of trying to address this problem. So maybe a few words on how these results tend to be inaccurate. Basically, historically, flexibility wasn't much of an issue in power system models. It was quite easily managed with conventional generation power plants. And as a result, when performing long-term planning studies, having a relatively simplified description of day-to-day operations of the power system wasn't really that much of an issue. As we have introduced more variability and uncertainty in the system due to different ongoing changes, flexibility is becoming more of a challenge and something that has a significant impact on power system planning. The issue is to be able to express this flexibility in our traditional models. We have to change the way things are done. So one way to do this is to add more time steps. Another way could be to try and provide proxies for different kind of phenomena that affect the power system operation into different equations or constraints that you might want to add to existing models. And another way would be to try and link different models together, some of them being able to solve the capacity expansion problem, while others might have a more detailed understanding of say, power system operations on an hourly basis, for example. That's quite a typical application. In contrast, other parameters have had that can potentially have a more significant impact on capacity expansion model results tend to be overlooked. They can be overlooked in different ways. Either they can be completely ignored, or they can just be somewhere behind in the model, but you never really see what's going on because maybe the model user just uses whatever values have been used in the previous study, or they might set different values, but not mention it when they write up a report or an academic paper. And often there can be different types of parameters on which we don't really know what value to provide for this parameter, so we kind of hide the problem and concentrate on things that the model user or the model developer may be more comfortable with. And so one of these parameters is maximum investment rate, and that is something that we've come across repeatedly in our long-term planning exercises at RT, the French Transmission System Operator. And it's something that really structures our external communication to the government, the regulator, to other European TSOs. And we wanted to kind of show how important this parameter is and how it impacts results, obviously, and to provide support for model users and people reading different reports based on these models to improve their critical opinion when being exposed to such results. And the way we chose to address this problem was to perform a sensitivity analysis to compare some relative impacts of temporal detail and maximum investment rates. So this is how we tried to do it. So as I said, in the framework that we used is OSeMOSYS. We added some functionality to it to improve the representation of power flows between different regions in our model. But this is not what I've chosen to focus on today. So I will say a few words on the case study. In terms of technological scope, here are the different fuels and technologies that we consider. So basically concentrate on the power system. We have about a dozen or so different generation technologies, both conventional, fossil, nuclear, and renewable. And we have two ways of storing energy, pumped hydro storage and battery. We adopt a brownfield approach. That is, we use existing capacities as an input data, and all across Europe, represented through 17 different regions. So each grey country consists and is represented using one region, and other coloured countries are represented using a single region. So, for example, Iberian Peninsula, British Isles, Nordic countries, Baltic countries. And we consider the period running from 2015 till 2050. And as I mentioned, brownfield approach. So we use existing capacities in 2015, 2020 to calibrate the model and to make sure that the maximum investment rates do actually have some kind of relevance. Because obviously, if you only use a greenfield approach, you're going to have a lot of trouble building up your power system in the first place. Nothing surprising here. Then in terms of our experimental setup, first of all, the temporal detail aspect, we used the typical way of representing time in OSeMOSYS. So we have our different investment years, one every 5 years in our period. Each year is split into 4 different seasons, and then you can split the seasons into different day types, and each day type into different daily time brackets. So here what we do is we consider 9 different time slice configurations. The one with the least temporal detail only has 24 time slices for each year, and one of the most 336. What we mostly do is vary the number of day types, which range from 1 per season in the most basic case to 14 per season in the most detailed case. And we select each day type at random, and we perform 6 different runs for each 9 different time slice configuration, with different random selection of days in each of these 6 runs. Obviously, this is not a recommended practice to select days at random. We only do this to provide an upper bound to the impacts of temporal detail in our sensitivity analysis. There are, of course, much better ways of choosing different day types, and there's quite a broad literature on the question. And then on the maximum investment rate side of things, we consider 4 different scenarios. We start with a high CO2 budget for the whole of Europe, but a subset of the full carbon budget for the power system, and we don't consider any maximum investment rate constraint. Then we divide the CO2 budget by 10, and then we gradually impose more stringent constraints on investment rates. First, 65 gigawatts per year per technology all across Europe, and then we divide that maximum investment rate by 2. So how did we choose this value of 64.8? Basically, we used an extrapolated historical data. We took 2 different periods in Europe where there were a very successful deployment of different generation technologies. So French nuclear in the 70s and 80s, and German renewables in the 2000s and 2010s. Based on this value, which we thought in either case was something that was already quite ambitious, we took this value and then ratioed it out across each of the different 17 regions in Europe based on the maximum annual demand. the idea was with this rather ambitious value, we were able to provide a lower bound for the impact of maximum investment rate relative to temporal detail. A brief comment, since we got the paper published and since we did the work, there has been quite a bit of a challenge maybe to the way we chose our assumption. So here we have the investment rate for solar PV in Germany. Since the war in Ukraine, there's been a massive increase in the deployment rate of solar PV in Germany, where historically it varied quite a lot from year to year, but on a 5-year period, it was roughly it didn't really exceed 25 gigawatts. And now in 2023, we reached 15 gigawatts. And in 2024, I think we even exceeded 17. So there are several things we can learn from this is, first of all, what might be considered as ambitious at a certain point in time may prove to be something that's perfectly doable only a few years after that. Maybe a comment on this maximum investment rate. It'll be much more difficult to increase it for certain technologies than for others. Basically, for something that's quite modular, decentralized, like solar PV, it'll be much more easy to kind of push this limit back. Where for centralized generation technologies such as coal and nuclear or hydro, it'll be much more complicated, particularly for nuclear. I think what has been achieved in France in the 70s and 80s hasn't been reproduced elsewhere since. So we can still consider it as kind of an upper bound. Moving on to results. First of all, looking at total system costs. So here we have total system cost on the y-axis and the number of time slices ranging from 23 to 336 on the x-axis. And we have for each point on the graph, we have one single run of osmosis. So each red point corresponds to the different colors correspond to the different scenarios. So scenarios in terms of carbon budget and maximum investment rate. And then within each of these colors, we have different points for each time slice configuration. And within each time slice configuration, we have 6 different points corresponding to 6 different sampling of random day types. So a few things we can learn here. First of all, the number of time slices doesn't seem to have much of an impact. We can also see that the more we add time slices, the less the random sampling aspect of day types tends to have an impact, in the sense that we have a larger distribution within a color here than we do on the 336 case. However, the different results we have in 4 different scenarios are much more different. And we have an 18% increase in the results that we have in the least constrained scenario. Sorry, when we moving from the least constrained scenario to the most constrained scenario, we have an 18% increase in total system costs. And I think this gap tends to decrease as we increase the number of time slices, but nothing major. Then moving on to the impact, the relative impact of temporal detail and limited investment rate on installed capacity. First of all, in the least constrained scenario, we can see that we have a European power system that is very largely PV plus battery. So something radically different to what we have at the moment. So sorry, this is for 2050. We have some wind capacity, but not a huge amount. Existing hydro capacity is still here. There is some gas capacity required to provide flexibility, and nuclear has kind of disappeared from the mix. So as I mentioned, high battery capacity in pink and some interconnection capacity in grey. We can also see that increasing the number of time slices doesn't really seem to have much of an impact, which kind of goes against what we can see in existing literature. I'll mention a few more things about this later, because we think we have an explanation for this. It'll be made clear in further graphs. As we decrease the carbon budget, there's some form of generation switching. Some gas capacity is replaced by mostly wind and nuclear capacity. The issue is the investment rates considered in these two scenarios are, well, infinite. And once we start putting constraints in, that has quite a significant impact on the result. So basically here we have a lot of solar capacity that is replaced first by wind capacity, and then as we limit the investment rates even further, wind again, and also nuclear. Sorry. So basically, in the optimization, all that is the solver can't invest in as much solar capacity as it would like, because it's limited in how much it can build. And so it's having to replace solar by more expensive generation technologies. More expensive, not in terms of LCOE, but in terms of how much value they bring to the whole system. And the cheaper technologies that are available first wind, and then sorry. Also, a few points to mention: the flexibility solutions that are proposed by the solver to manage supply and demand on a detailed basis. Basically, in a system that's dominated by solar and a system where part of the solar capacity has been replaced by wind and nuclear, the flexibility requirements are quite different. So basically, in the two bottom subplots here, we have more solar. The most suited flexibility solutions are batteries. And as we remove solar from the system, we also remove quite a lot of batteries that tend to be replaced by nuclear and interconnectors, which are interconnectors tend to be more suited to wind-dominated systems. If we move on to generation mix, so this is it kind of directly relates to the previous graph, but it allows to point out the extent to which the generation mix changes depending on the maximum investment rate scenario. Basically, we move from a system that's about 40% solar, 13% wind, and 10% nuclear, something like that, in the least constraint scenario, to about 20% solar, 20% wind, and 40% nuclear. So just in the fact that we aren't able to deploy low carbon generation technology fast enough means that we completely have to change the structure of the power system. Within each color band, the different points here correspond to the different time slice configurations and date type sampling. So here we can see that we have quite large bands for some of the technologies, and These distributions tend to be more limited depending on the technology. This will be made clear in the following graph here, where we basically reverse the way the graph has been built. We show the generation for each technology, and each color corresponds to a time slice configuration rather than a maximum investment rate scenario. If we look at solar, we clearly have three different subparts to the different clusters, really. So here corresponds to the top cluster corresponds to the unlimited maximum investment rate scenarios with two different carbon budgets. And then the two different clusters correspond to when we started constraining maximum investment rate. We can also see that for different time slice configurations and for different samplings of date types, we don't really see much of an impact on solar capacity. And the reason for that is solar variability can be reasonably well described with a seasonal element and a daily element, so intradaily. So basically, providing we use a sufficiently high number of daily time brackets, let's say 4 seasons, we are able to describe solar variability rather well. So we do see that as we increase the number of time slices, there's a decrease in the distribution here, but it's still something that's very limited compared to what we have on onshore and offshore wind. Here, the reason is quite similar. Basically, onshore, wind variability tends to have a very significant annual element. But apart from that, it tends to be quite random, year on year, week on week, day on day. As a result, depending on what day type we select here at random, we can have vastly different different installed capacity and hence contribution to the power mix. And this translates into these very wide distributions we have for wind capacity. And basically, nuclear power plants pick up the slack. Whatever wasn't built, whatever wind capacity wasn't built because it was more or less interesting depending on the different day types that were selected. Well, nuclear either builds, we either build more nuclear power plants or less. And here it's also interesting to note that as we add more time slices, the distribution doesn't really reduce, meaning that even with 14 days used for each of the 4 different seasons, we're not able to actually capture the variability in different wind profiles. So this goes to show that basically there is very important to have smart ways of selecting different day types. It can be either clustering or all different techniques that are available out there in existing literature. And it also shows that depending on what system you're trying to model, you might have to go into different directions. If you're considering a region that has very high solar potential and no wind potential, well, potentially you're not going to have to kind of worry too much about this temporal detail aspect. Obviously, this is not going to be the case when you consider a region with a very large wind potential. Also, another point to make regarding the way we build time slices and also the way we select different representative days within our time slice building process. It will also depend on the size of the region that we're trying to model. If we model, let's say, an industrial hub or an insular system, or even a small country that's disconnected from its neighbors, it might be a lot easier to express the temporal variability in the wind profile because we won't be worried about simultaneously expressing temporal variability and geographical variability across our system. Here we have the whole European system, which has different wind profiles. There's different weather fronts on the North Sea, on the Atlantic coast, on the Mediterranean, and in Eastern Europe and Scandinavia as well. So basically, there may be parts of Europe where there are very interesting wind capacity factors and specific days, and very low capacity factors elsewhere. If your system is small enough that you don't have these wide differences in instantaneous capacity factors, you might be able to express this wind variability in wind profiles using a more limited number of representative day types. A few key messages. First of all, related to what I've been saying just now, more time steps is not necessarily better. You should take special care when selecting representative days, especially when you have large wind potentials. I think the different results I've shown have made it very clear we need to be very cautious about technology investment rates. Their impact on different key results is very important, and it's too important for us to be able to neglect a thorough and transparent discussion on how the different parameters are set. We can't just hide it under the rug. And that's something that we should keep in mind, both in terms of, well, model developers, first of all. We should guide model users in the right directions into where they should focus focus on their sensitivity analyses. And as model users, we need to make sure that we make things clear as to what is sensitive to what. We need to make sure that we don't try and hide potentially uncomfortable parameters from our reports, just because we don't really know how to set the different values, and we would rather show how much effort we've put into the detailed complexity of the modeling, which potentially is a lot more interesting to a larger audience. Potentially is also a subject which is much more likely to be publishable. But that shouldn't make us forget what really is important and what are the most significant parameters for us to have a look at. And then, well, I find that these results also show the degree to which our ability to meet climate targets hinges on our ability to roll out low carbon infrastructure fast enough. Because if we aren't able to build such technology as fast as we should, it'll completely change the structure of the power mix, and completely change the different companies that we have in a specific region. The expertise required for running the different components of the power system, and the way the power system is operated as well. So this is something that needs to be prepared decades in advance. And if we aren't aware of this difficulty, we'll go into the wrong directions because we're not conscious that this is such a limiting factor. A few limitations to the work I've presented. First of all, as I mentioned in the case study setup description, maximum investment rate parameter is very difficult to set. And when we don't know what value to give to this parameter, well, I think the only way to be honest is to show how to perform sensitivity analyses, to test the different values for it, and to show how much it has sort of an impact. Here we have limited our scope to the power sector. If we extend our analysis to the hydrogen system, to the heat system, to potentially CH4 system as well, this could potentially exacerbate the conclusions that we've drawn in this paper. First of all, because sector coupling is presumably going to increase electricity demand and hence require additional generation capacity, making maximum investment rates all the more stringent. And second of all, because level temporal detail is required to express limitations related to flexibility. Flexibility in a sector coupled system might be easier to manage because there are more flexibility solution providers, really. We should also mention that certainly sector coupling, if managed correctly, can provide power system flexibility. But if it's not managed properly, if it's not regulated properly, if the different investment and operational signals sent to the different power system components are not the right ones, it could make the flexibility challenge even more challenging for the power system. This is a limitation that applies to all use of capacity expansion models such as OSeMOSYS. There are a lot of other issues that these models fail to grasp. A common one is adequacy, or let's say hourly operation of a power system, unit commitment problems, ramping issues, and that kind of stuff. Another one is stability or inertia, internal network congestion, day-ahead uncertainty, imperfect markets, decentralized power system component behavior. There are lots of very, very important aspects that have an impact on the way power systems should be structured that aren't considered in these models. And that's maybe a way of pointing towards our current use of osmosis and RT. What we use it for is for soft linking. So basically, we solve the capacity expansion problem with osmosis and then feed this information into a more detailed model on power system operation, power system or sector coupled system hourly operation. This tends to lead to, well, the general results that we have often seen in the literature. It tends to lead to large amounts of lost load, which requires quite significant changes to power system capacity, and that's kind of what our ongoing work is structured around, sending information from the results of a unit commitment and economic dispatch model back to OSeMOSYS to try and provide a general solution that meets a certain degree of security of supply. There are different ways of doing so. It's quite a complicated process, but basically on the OSeMOSYS problem, what you can do is add constraints to express such and such phenomena that osmosis can't see due to this level of detail. And you can update parameter values from one iteration to the next to try and provide a general solution that is adequate. And that's all from my end. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm ready to answer any questions we may have. I'll do my best.
Thank you, Thomas, for this very impressive presentation. I have to say that it's really great to see how osmosis can be used and what kind of insights we can get, and even more than that, that you are already using it for real world applications and also in soft linking with other tools that is also very, very interesting. So now let's say that the floor is for our attendance. So just in case that you have any questions, doubts, comments, suggestions, etc., you are very welcome to participate. So please feel free to raise your hand, and I will allow you to speak.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, I got new perspective to utilizing osmosis. Again, I'm Shari Babajide, a very good user of osmosis, especially the click sound model. Now, my question is this. You made mention of the kind of recommendation that one should use short time frame, like instead of using a long time period. I would love to ask two questions in this regard. Number one, why a short time period, like say maybe 5, 10 years period into the future? And secondly, in that regards, how would one assess or make investigation about long-term energy planning, maybe up to 2060, to assess for a net or low carbon transition as a case maybe into the future? For example, in Africa, it goes up to 2063. So how would one analyze and see analysis from this perspective in the very long term? I hope my questions are clear.
Sorry, I'm not sure I quite got your first question about the time frame that's considered in the study.
Okay, why? Why is it a short time frame that is utilized? Why a short time frame?
Okay.
And the second question has to do with the implication.
Okay. So basically, the time frame that was considered is from 2015 to 2050. So 35 years and 5-year investment time steps. The reason why the different studies, maybe that's a link to what we do in the power system in Europe, and basically politicians in Europe have built their low carbon pathways to 2050. The objective is to reach net zero by 2050, and that kind of structures the way we have performed our different studies in the power sector and the energy sector and beyond. So that's why we go up to that date and not necessarily any further. We are trying to extend our analysis to maybe 2060 to show that well, it's not an end game in 2050. There are still many things. There's still many questions that will remain open. But the general idea is the energy sector will have to be net zero, and once we're able to do that, well, the main challenge will have been sorted out, kind of. I'm curious, the studies that you perform on your end, what time frame do you tend to consider?
Yeah, actually by 2060.
2060, okay. Have you tried going beyond?
Yes, maybe 2065, because according to AU Energy Planning Framework, African Union is up to 2063, to assess when Africa will transit to the kind of low carbon development and even net zero. For example, in Nigeria, where I'm from, the transition framework is up to 2060. Okay. So that's why I'm would it give a kind of weak representation of the overall system moving forward with a longer time frame? Since Europe is 2050, several countries has their own time frame and they're about to achieve a kind of low carbon development, transition neutrality, net zero, thereof in their national policy. So that's what led to the question,
Okay, I guess basically the further you go into the future, the more uncertainty there is, and the more you need to take a scenario-based approach rather than an optimization-based approach. Particularly, a massive uncertainty we have in Europe at the moment is how demand will evolve. It really depends on consumer behavior for a start, on energy efficiency also, but also on population pathways, on the extent to which we bring our industry back to Europe. And based on the answers to these different questions, we could maybe half our electricity consumption or multiply it by 4 or 5. So beyond 2050, I don't think we'd be able to bring much useful insight to policymakers and decision makers.
Okay, thank you.
Good, perfect. Thank you, Babajit, for your questions. Now, considering that we don't have anyone else with the let's say trying to ask a question, maybe we can go with the chat. We have one question. So the question is, why do the time slices stop at 336? There are like 36, 364 or 365 days in a year. If a modeler wanted the time slices to be in days per year, wouldn't that be a problem?
Um, so 336 time slices is used, they're used to represent both intradaily and interweekly or interseasonal variations. So each of them correspond to from four representative days to 56. Yes, ideally, we would like to have a lot more time slices to express the different types of variability that power system is likely to be exposed to. Um, I mean, you could say that you would like to have 1 day per year and no representation of inter-daily variability, but then you'd miss a lot of very important variations on on the demand side and on the solar side. Ideally, you could also move all the way up to 8,760 hours per year and hence time slices for each investment year. You could also want to have even more than that to represent different weather years. That's typically what we do in our unit commitment and economic dispatch simulations, in which we consider several hundreds of different weather years to express the different variability to which you'll expose in the power system. Um, all of this is very costly in terms of computational time and in terms of the size of the problem that has to be solved. So we in our model setup we weren't able to really go beyond 336 because we have 17 different regions that are interconnected, and we have investment on power transmission capacity. So and our technological scope is reasonably large as well. So crossing the two together means that we aren't able to deal with bigger problems than that. And that was on a high performance server where we had access to 1 terabyte of RAM. So we would have liked to go beyond, but sadly wasn't possible.
Good, thank you, Thomas. We also have another question in our Q&A bots. So the question is, which software tool are you using to investigate the soft linking approach with osmosis? Are you also working with open source tools like, for example, FlexTool?
The model we use for our soft linking with OSeMOSYS is Antares. It's our inbuilt, in-house model that we develop, and that is open source. So it's an power system simulation, hourly behavior simulation tool, where we consider, as I mentioned, several hundreds of weather years. We typically cover the whole of Europe on the one to a few nodes per country. And so we can use it either to solve an investment problem or to solve an operational problem. In our soft linking framework, we use it only on the operational side of things. So it's called Antares, Antares. It's open source. You can download it online for free. We have a users club in which we have a few transmission system operators in Europe. We have a few open data case studies as well that we can provide and that are available online. There's a link to it in the paper actually. And if you have any more questions about that model, I'm in the team that develops it, so I can certainly get back to you and provide you with more detailed information. Do we also use other programs to optimize like Lingo? I haven't heard of Lingo. We do use other tools to solve the investment problem as well, in our different links to academia. So our links to academia are almost entirely in Europe. PIPESA is a model that we hear a lot about and that we're considering having a look at. And we also have different models in-house for in the different academic partners that we have.
Good, perfect. Thank you, Thomas. I don't see any extra. Okay, I think okay, there is another like let's say reply to your answer is do you also use other programs to optimize like Lingo?
Yeah, sorry, I took the liberty of answering this question already. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Oh yeah. Good. So I think there are no more questions. Okay, I think there is. Okay, there are. It says in the simulations of different weather GRs, are you also looking at extreme climatic events like, for example, extreme droughts?
Yes, exactly. That's the very reason we use a large number of weather years. Basically, our National Meteorological Office has a different climate and weather models that they've used to simulate several hundreds of different weather conditions on an hourly basis with a quite refined geographical resolution. And based on the outputs of these models, we perform our hourly dispatch simulations in our model Antares. So the idea is within this large distribution of what can happen in terms of weather across a year on an hourly basis, we're able to express variability linked to so temperature and hence to electricity demand, but also wind speeds and hence wind generation. Same for solar radiation and also precipitation as well. So we are able to have some representation. Well, to based on our best understanding of the way our climate system currently works, we are able to show different distributions of what the different weather conditions can look like. Our partner has done this both for current climate and for 2050 climate in different RCP scenarios. So basically, based on what the climate is likely to be in 2050, we have 200, several sets of 200 years of hourly weather data, which we can use to simulate how our system behaves.
Good. Thank you, Thomas. Okay. Okay, now I think it's the same question. Are you also looking at scenarios of compounding extreme events? But I think it's, do you want to re-add on that question? Are you also looking at the scenarios of compounding extreme events? But I think it was
I'm
related to the previous one.
assuming by compounding extreme events, you mean crossing the fact that you may have low precipitation, low wind generation, and high demand at the same time? Yes, because basically the way our data sets work is we have perfectly correlate. Well, we express the different correlations between the different variables of our climate model.
Good, perfect. Thank you. And okay, I have just because I don't see any more questions, just because we are almost to finish our session. I just want to ask you two practical questions more than technical. The first one is why did you choose Osmosis as your modeling tool for this research? And the second question is we have many new users of Osmosis and also different students working throughout different projects right now, and they are trying to obviously learn and know more about the tool. What kind of pieces of advice you can provide to those new users and students who are starting this, let's say, pathway of learning with osmosis? Those questions. Thank you.
So why did we choose osmosis? I think the major reasons are the fact that it's open source and the quality of the documentation that is provided. the high genericity in the model framework, the fact that nothing is, or nearly nothing is hard coded, basically provides a lot of flexibility in the way we want to model different components. We can add different modules, and thanks to its modular behavior, modular nature, which is what we did with our power system transmission module that we added to OSeMOSYS. I honestly found it was pretty easy to dig into the documentation to understand the way the code was built, the different sets of equation. I don't know about the other programming languages, but the version in PyOMO I thought was extremely clear as well. PyOMO has its limitations, particularly in terms of performance. We can do currently better things with other optimization packages based in Python. If I'm not aware of because I don't really follow the OSeMOSYS community very closely, so there might be ongoing work to try and switch a PyOMO to I've forgotten the name of that other optimization package for Python, which is presumably much more powerful. And in terms of advice I could give to new OSeMOSYS users, I haven't really ever thought about it, but I think playing about with all the different parameters, automating the production of graphs based on the result, and just playing about with the model, trying to understand what has an impact on what is not only a very good way of gaining experience as how to use the model, but it's also a very effective way of gaining understanding of the system that OSeMOSYS is able to model.
Good. Perfect, Thomas. I think we don't have any more questions for you, and we are just on time for finishing this session. So once again, thank you so much for your kindness and your willingness to participate in this event. I hope that maybe you can join us in future events. And also for our attendance, thank you so much for your questions, for your participation, and I hope to see you again in one of our future webinars. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Good. Bye bye. Have a great day.